The Lifetime Achievement Award goes to Mike McCarthy.
Michael McCarthy was the winner of the RTS Lifetime Achievement Award in 2019.
Thank you, RTS. This is such an honour.
He has an incredible ongoing career, from working as staff at the BBC during the dawn of Television Centre to many years since as an incredibly popular freelancer, witnessing and surviving many changes within the industry. It's a career that spanned 6 decades. The list of incredible shows he's helped bring to life is endless, not forgetting that microphone. This Peter Pan of sound designers still has a hand on the sound of Saturday night television. Join Michael McCarthy in conversation with fellow sound supervisor Richard Sillitto. It's all about the sound.
Hello and welcome. I'm Richard Sillitto. I'm a sound supervisor and I work very often with Mike McCarthy. I have done for many years. In fact, ever since I was a little boy, I was fortunate enough to go and visit Mike at the BBC. So I've seen him for many years. And it's going to be interesting today to hear some of the stories because Mike has really lived television for many, many years and has some wonderful stories. So Mike, where did it all begin? How did you start? Did you always want to do sound?
Hello, Richard. Yes, I think I did. But I was given a tape recorder when I was, 14 or 15 by my father, which was it was a hand-built one. I'm not sure where he got it from. It was in a wooden box with a write and wear deck and big valves in it. And I started playing with it and took it into school and started recording a few odds and ends. And suddenly realised that recording wasn't just recording what was there, it was what you could do with the sound having got it. I mean, by moving the microphone a few feet this way or that way, it would affect what the listener was hearing, and you could create all sorts of images from the same event. And then a couple of years later, I managed to get a vortexion machine, which was vastly improved. It didn't wow, and it ran at 7.5, and it had decent mic amps in it, or a decent mic amp in it, and then just recorded school stuff from then on. Choirs, oratorios. We had a very good biology master who wrote music for school for the plays, and it was quite difficult music. And although they used to do it live for quite a long time, he was getting so experimental with his music that it almost had to be recorded to make sense of it, and it was 12 tone and it was very odd. So there was lots of time of recording the orchestra, playing with that, finding sound effects for plays, playing the sound effects back in the hall with Ariel in the Tempest, her voice coming up and down the school hall with speakers on the sides. And it was just the fun of doing it and the creation of what we could do that really inspired me. And I don't think I felt I wouldn't benefit from a university degree because I found A-levels hard enough. And so I applied to the BBC, applied to Decca. Decca wanted me to go to night school. The BBC wanted to train me and send me away for 3 months to have sort of decent training. I mean, in hindsight, I think that a recording studio with Decca, which is producing magnificent recording and magnificent sounds, I think I would have got bored with that after a time. And you are there for hours and hours and hours going on into that. I mean, don't do that in television, but somehow television had much more going for it. And I don't think I'd have stayed in a recording studio for the rest of my life as I seem to in a television studio. I didn't do much drama. Probably I wasn't very good at it when I eventually became a mixer, but I am not good at doing take 7. Take 1 is probably all right. Take 2 might be slightly better, but after that, it just goes downhill.
So you started at the BBC. You were fortunate enough to get recruited by them. So how did that feel at the start? You went off to Wood Norton. I bet that was a bit of an experience.
An interesting place. I didn't go to a boarding school, but I had a feeling it was very much like a boarding school because at that time it was Nissen huts. There were 2 to each bedroom. There was a communal washroom at the end with wash basins, I suppose, a bit like an older type campsite. But I suppose we accepted it. And most of the staff were probably ex-army, and it was very much a military sort of exercise. I mean, there were women around, but they were only sound radio, and it was very much frowned upon that should any of we lads have women in the rooms, there was only for but very valuable training, taken through everything. I could line up the television cameras, I could vision mix, I knew the rudiments of lighting, and with sound. I mean, it was a very comprehensive 3-month course. If you didn't pass, you went. So there was an incentive to get to the end.
Yeah.
It was very pleasant. It got a nice group of people, and we were all there to do the same thing. So no, that was very useful.
So how did you find that translated when you actually then had your first day at Television Centre, was it? Or did you...
Actually, the first day was at Lyme Grove. I mean, all the training was invaluable. What surprised me about my first entry into the television studio, because Norton was, as I say, quite formal, that I was taken in by, I can't remember who, and introduced to the technical manager who sat at the end of the production desk. And I was introduced, Mike, this is Alec, this is Mike. And certainly that number of years ago, for somebody just under 20 or whatever, you certainly didn't talk to anybody on Christian name terms. It wasn't done. I had all my neighbours, next door neighbours, I would call Mr. that and Mrs. that. I mean, it was just the way of life. So this was quite a big shock to suddenly find that people were talking in Christian name terms. No, certainly my first year, I probably went to cameras first, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And I enjoyed tracking cameras, the big mole cameras in night entertainment shows where you could really rush across the floor during the song and whatever. And I think I was deemed to be fairly good at it. And I thought, well, actually, perhaps I'll become a cameraman, even though I wanted to be a sound man. And then I did a bit of lighting, and I was always aware that every time we went, particularly when I was doing cameras, so we went down to the studio floor, we'd go to our relevant cameras and dollies and whatever, and then a group of people would suddenly appear who would climb up onto the booms, and they'd move stuff about, and they'd organise themselves, and they'd talk on a totally different talkback system. These were the sound people who I was going to join later in the year, and I was beginning to wonder whether these were the sort of people I wanted to, because they seemed so sort of insular, and they seemed to have their own little world. It's all quite strange folk, really. So anyway,
we are
9 months in, I was ushered into the sound control room, say, "Oh, this is Mike, he's a trainee, you look after him." And suddenly there were all these wonderful people, and they had their own room, and they sat and talked about the program, and they planned how they were going to do it, and they seemed to be so autonomous within the whole of the system. I mean, whilst still directly having to work to the director and to the producer, they seemed able to sort out what was needed, and also there was always somebody who could help you sort you out with your central heating or your car engine or whatever. I mean, there was just so many knowledgeable people. So I joined these very strange people. I suppose we are just very strange. I suppose the BBC did have the luxury of being able to have trainees on the crew, and everybody was given a chance to do things. And there were enough people, as you say, for somebody perhaps not to be needed in the evening. And unfortunately, because that isn't the case now. And there were shows such as Play School, which were wonderful to do, but also quite difficult to do, particularly if you were sound mixing, because everybody was a trainee. And I mean, it was right that it was that way, but the director would probably be quite new to directing. The lighting person will be new to lighting, to training. You would crew the sound crew down so that the junior people could get a chance of training doing booms. And so every shot virtually was an effort, because there would probably be a boom shadow because the lighting guy hadn't necessarily planned it properly. But it was so good that you could then also work through problems with everybody. And you eventually get to, and I mean, it's such a lovely show to do anyway, but it was having, when I was first given my first sitcom, I was told, well, you know, this is serious work. You know, you must plan it, you must make sure you've liaised with everybody, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, it was actually so much easier than play school, because everybody knew what they were doing. I mean, artists spoke up, lighting people lit, so you could use the boom, because I mean, booms were the main source of pickup in those days. Camera people maintained the shots they'd rehearsed with and didn't suddenly go to a wide shot, which from our point of view would mean the booms in shot. In many ways, it was a much easier show to do.
Yes.
Just from a technical point of view, it's one of the reasons I also didn't enjoy drama, that there were many more, is technical problems the right word, because of the complexity of the artist's movements and the way that the movement happens within a drama set. There were many more problems with boom shadows and trying to get sound out of people standing in corners, which again, some folks seem to enjoy tremendously, but I, like yourself, I found that quite tedious, really. I just want people to walk on, down to the front, speak up and walk off. I mean,
Yes.
Which is all you ask, really, of any actor, isn't it? That, but, and thankfully, I've sort of worked with directors who work by that principle.
Thinking about things like Fisher booms and so on, and how the technology's changed, I'm sure you've seen immeasurable changes over the years.
Yes, I mean, the sound pickup was the boom, come whatever the show, whether it was current affairs or drama, or I mean, one of the sound managers, I think, had the phrase that a boom was a microphone with intelligence, which of course, with a good boom operator, it is. You can cover 5, 6, 7 people all with the one microphone, and if the microphone is in the right place for each person's dialogue, you're not fading up 6, 7 radio mics. But boom operating is a skill which took people a while to learn, and unfortunately, because it's now not used a great deal, when there are sitcoms being recorded, it's mainly older folk who are doing the booms, because they're the people who know how to do it, because the young folk unfortunately haven't had a chance to do it. I mean, it's not their fault, but it's
yes, those opportunities are far and few between, really. And you need the sort of culture somewhere like the BBC where you can learn, and when there's a dark day, you can go in and sit on the boom and try and write your name on the board. Yeah. So so that was booms, and then how did you find like mixing? I mean, I guess the music at that time was changing.
It was. I mean, and going back to the mixers generally, the mixer in, I think it was Studio D, which was the first studio I was taken into, had rotary faders. And I'm not sure how many there were, probably 8, 10. There were, and all the sound effects were played in off 78 gramophone records, which you could queue up and hopefully play the right one. I didn't on one live drama. I supposed to play a foghorn and a horse gallop past. Perhaps that's why I didn't do any more drama. Yes, but I mean, for those who don't know, I mean, the progression in television was that you would train generally, then do floor work and learn boom operating. And if you wanted to, you could move up to be a gram op, which I suppose is quite an old-fashioned term now, yes. Because you played gramophone records. But I mean, if we are asked to do stuff now, we're still doing grams, even though it's coming off a computer. And then after that, you could apply to be a sound mixer. So you'd have been through all the various levels. I mean, I was very lucky. I think I've been very lucky all the way along, that after a couple of years, ITV started and they needed staff. And the only places they could get staff in the main was the BBC. So quite a few people left, and which meant vacancies, so we could all move up one. And then BBC Two started, so it meant more crew were needed. So we all moved up again. And so progression was very, very quick. I mean, it was just very, very fortunate at that time that I was there, and that's what happened.
Yes, good opportunity, and television was just exploding. art. It was all new, and it must have been very exciting actually to be a part of so many things that had never been tried before or done before, because
I
we
think
now.
that's the difference. I mean, although the things you get involved with today have such greater complexity than anything that was ever done, because of the unreliability of the equipment and the fact that you really had to work quite hard to keep it all going and had to have so many standbys just in case. I suppose, yes, we probably worked equally hard, but I don't think so, as you do now. And the sound desk didn't have any equalization. They didn't have any compression, any limiting,
Wow.
which was fine, because up until probably the time I joined, things were based very much on sound radio, which really can and does turn out some magnificent sound. But of course, we were moving into the era of pop groups with levels coming out of their amplifiers, which the people who designed the equipment for the BBC, I mean, because BBC had its own research department, they designed the sound desks, they designed the amplifiers, that everything was BBC built. But it was built really for levels of dialogue and symphony orchestras, which by the time you've rigged a mic on a symphony orchestra, which is going to be at quite a distance, the level into the microphone is not enormous. But as you know, I mean, put a mic in front of a cabinet on a pop group and the level out of there is enormous. And it was a great surprise to the research department that we couldn't turn things down enough. But you have perfect amplifiers. I mean, you've got perfect microphones. Why? What's wrong? And so they came into, it's up in the old grey whistle test, I think, which is where it really started showing up, and measured the output from the microphones and just could not believe that the level, when we don't make things for these sort of levels. And so things developed, that progression had to move, or things had to move on quite quickly, because so many things were changing. And so, as you say, so many demands were, and program ideas were coming in that needed different techniques. It wasn't just somebody talking in front of a room. I mean, I'm not dismissing anything that people did before. I have great respect for everybody who's worked through the years, but suddenly perfection and reproducing the exact sound as heard in the studio was no longer what we needed. Because as you and I know, I was going to say, we don't do quality. We do quality, but it's quality that's been defined by various sort of parameters. I mean, equalization. If you, in a television studio, you have a lot of ventilation, the hums, the hums from the lamps, and so putting the perfect microphone in the front of the speaker means you are picking up very nice dialogue, but an awful lot of background noise. You need perhaps a little bit of EQ to get rid of those noises, which was different from, again, from sound radio studios, as I understand it, where really they were designed for excellent speech and excellent music and minimal background noise. And also we needed to create different images. I mean, with a pop group, with a hi-hat or a snare, you want it nice and hard in the middle. The perfect microphone will reproduce it, but not necessarily produce the sound that the record industry was producing. So equalization had to come in. And as for limiting, I mean, that was a dreadful thing. I mean, you can't limit the system. But we were doing, dramas were being done. And they sat in the sound control room, they sounded magnificent. That people would sound chatting, somebody would walk away in the distance, they would get quieter, and they'd walked away and the sound would match it. But of course, to people viewing at home, that's no good. I mean, the buses going past the door, the washing machine's on, there's somebody upstairs clonking about. You've got to have a consistency of level with the dialogue. And there began to be quite a lot of complaints to say, why is it, because BBC has started importing quite a lot of American programs, why is it we can hear every word in American programs, even when somebody is in the distance on the top of a mountain, but we can't on the BBC? So yes, we then moved into compressors and limiters to try and get the dialogue into a restricted range, which, I mean, you and I do, because we know you can then build everything else around that. But if your dialogue is just disappearing, there's no use to man and the beast. I mean, you can still get perspective by increasing the acoustic of the person going into the distance, but keep the level up.
Years ago, we were working together on a lottery, and you'd just been off to do an OB, and you came back and you said, oh, I did this and I put a speaker there and it didn't quite work, and I realized that if we moved it there it would improve it. And I learned something from that I never realized before. And I thought, this is amazing. You've been doing the job for a fair old time and you're still learning things, and I think that is the beauty of it. We're constantly evolving our technology to match what production are requiring, and our skill base as well. Our skills are constantly changing to accommodate these things. And as you say, the productions we do today are very different from the ones perhaps done, you know, in the early days of television. But it's all just an evolution. Everything's just building on the building blocks that everyone has laid before.
I mean, that's the exciting thing, isn't it, really? That I think if everything had changed, stayed as it was in 1961, I'd be bored stiff.
Yes.
Another thing, I was talking to somebody the other day. I mean, the only way of adding reverberation in the early 60s was to have an echo room, so that if you had an actor who was supposedly in a church, you wanted to hear the church surrounding him, the sound was sent down to this big room in the basement. The dialogue from the actor came out of a loudspeaker. It bounced down the tiled room, a bit like a gent's loo, and at the other end a microphone picture, and you mixed that echoey sound with his voice. I mean, that was a full-size room. There were 3 of those. I think you saw one the other day when you were going around the centre. Who would pay to have 3 empty rooms, let alone the restriction that they only gave one sort of sound these days? But I mean, things had to move on. Then we moved to having tape loops with lots of replay heads, so that you could it made a bit of a fluttery echo, but you could get it longer. And then there were enormous great plates hung vertically. I think it was a couple of meters long and probably a foot wide, with a big knob on the top, and you could increase or decrease the length of the reverberation. And now we just sit here in our little rooms and we
click a button,
reverb, and there it is. I mean, and we can make every parameter different. It is that's been the great interest. I mean, certainly the early Dad's Armies, well, all the Dad's Armies were not post-produced at all. They were done, as sitcoms still are, virtually as live with pickups, because when you've got an audience, you can't keep going back because they lose interest. And if you ask them to laugh, you get very sort of forced laughs anyway. So that those, of course, all sitcoms and LE shows, I suppose, depend very much on having a very good warm-up man as well. It can make such a difference. I mean, there was a lovely guy that worked with David. I'm purposely not mentioning people's names because I think I will leave somebody out if I do. But he was so good at making the audience feel welcome, because they've probably been queuing in the rain. But if he wasn't there for 1 week and somebody else who wasn't used to being a warm-up artist, you could really tell the difference with the audience, because once they're in the right frame of mind, so, and particularly, I mean, not that one would ever dub laughs anyway, but if before we did dub, I mean, the occasion when you're mending edits, you had to pick up what was the audience was doing. I mean, again, I'm sorry to keep deviating. That was, and I think you probably find the same, that was such great fun that the dialogue and the actors were going along in front of you. They would be saying funny lines. You can't just leave audience mics sitting above people. It doesn't work, which used to be the way of doing it when I joined the BBC, and there were always complaints about, oh, we can't hear enough of the audience. You really have to play along, and whenever they come to a piece of dialogue, I mean, to be honest, I don't judge whether, as you pointed out, you don't judge whether it is funny, because somebody might think it's funny. So I give every line gets the benefit of the doubt. So you fade up the audience mic, they laugh, and you take it down again. Certainly listening to some of my early stuff, probably some of my later stuff, which when I see it now, I cry into my beer with, because the laughs are so clipped, because you, for various reasons, you can't have the audience mics faded up a long way while the artist is speaking, because otherwise they sound as though they're in a big cave.
Yeah.
So you can only have the audience up in the gap, and so it's a very fast up and a very fast down, and it almost sounds you've just plonked laughs in there. But people want, particularly in the 60s and 70s, wanted to hear more and more laughter, and it was this very, very, to my mind, very clipped laughter, but that's what it was. So yes, an interesting, with just thinking of warm up and reaction. On a couple of occasions later, because there wasn't much pre-recording in the days of Dad's Army, we would perhaps pre-record, particularly for a sketch show, you would pre-record an item, a sketch, so that the artist would go and change for their next sketch live, and you'd play a preview run into the audience. And there was one sketch, I certainly remember, you played it to the audience, absolutely no reaction at all. We'll play it in next week. Play it in the same situation to the audience the next week, and everybody fell off their seats. You're so much in the hands of the group,
Yes,
that's around you, and so you can't judge, well, they're going to laugh here and they're not going to laugh there. You really have, which as you know, makes it a very difficult job. But I just loved the sitting there going for the laughs, and particularly on a show that was going well.
yes.
I mean, it's just so pleasurable. It's a little game you play that. But again, always getting the laugh out before the next bit of dialogue starts, because certainly as a viewer, if you can't hear the incoming dialogue, I mean, it's not worth watching. I was just thinking about Blankety Blank. That, I mean, as you know, we had to make a microphone for that. Went to the initial planning meeting. We saw the American version, and they had a little microphone. Oh no, we're not going to use that, so go home. That's fine. And then the day before the show, because we've decided we want to use that. Can you make us up a microphone? And I made it out of car radio aerials. I mean, this is the only thing I could think of with a hole down the middle, which didn't seem to last very long quite often when you had Kenny Everett around.
Are you still broadcasting?
I don't trust you. I don't trust any show that asks me back twice.
Don't. I was against it.
And look at this silly mite. I mean, really. I mean, look at that. Cheap BBC equipment. I mean,
So strong.
As soon as you're ready, gang.
I think I've still got that microphone somewhere. It'll take me a moment because I've got to climb over all the technical things, but talk amongst yourselves. Take that off. See, preparation is all in these things. Let's, this will probably knock the camera over. This will probably have tea on, so we get down here. There we are, the Wogan wand.
Well, Kenny Everett's had a go at it, I reckon.
Yeah, it's no, I mean, because they were car radio aerials, that little local shop down the road, and they really couldn't understand why I kept going in for so many. I mean, he said, what keeps happening, Joey? Oh, I said, it's just a bit of bother. I must have got through a dozen, I suppose, but anyway, only £4.50 each.
Yeah, a lovely idea. So
let's put the prop down.
Okay. Stay with us. So yes, we were saying earlier about how part of the job of being a sound supervisor is the actual mixing is just one element of it. There's a lot more involved in terms of managing the crews, putting together planning, thinking ahead before the show. I seem to recall you telling a story about a similar sort of panel show where you had 2 rows of contestants and you're told absolutely the back row won't talk, and then obviously come the studio they all talk away at 10 to the dozen. But fortunately, being an experienced sound supervisor, you planned ahead and covered that scenario. No,
I mean, well, unfortunately, I think he's gone now. But I mean, to this day, I mean, the producer always mentions this whenever he sees it. Oh, because I remember I told you they didn't speak in the back row. Yes, I mean, it stuck with him for quite a long time.
Working with these sort of techniques brought about things like cipher and so on.
Because productions became more adventurous, and this whole business of even editing what used to be 2-inch videotapes. And you mentioned your father. I mean, he was a consummate artist of rebuilding the sound over that edit where he'd chop through things. But it was very time consuming. But he would turn out something that was perfect. But there also then became a time where you didn't necessarily want to put out exactly what you recorded in the studio. You wanted to add more music because things had been shortened in real time in the edit, so you can't put on the music while the thing's happening. So it's nicely edited, you can put the music on. So a way had to be found that we could add sound afterwards, which the film industry had been doing probably for 60 years and whatever. And I mean, initially we did try, because it was the only way of doing it, was the edited program was just played back to us in a little sound room, and we would try and add all the music and the sound effects that we needed that were extra as it went past, and dub it for live. And because there was no way of going back and finding a reference, so it was very much alive, and it worked, but it didn't allow for
Messing.
great scope. No, I mean, so systems were devised, again, based on the film industry, really, where they had lots of separate magnetic audio track machines, that 8-track audio recorders were available. And by the use of time code, which slowly people began to realize, if you had time code associated with the picture and then you had time code associated with the sound, you could get some machinery to lock the two together. Which did mean that you could stop, you could start, and you could add little bits, you could go back and do it again. And the whole dubbing empires went from there, really. That we, in the main, you just had an 8-track. I mean, for things like Hitchhikers, we had a 24-track because you just needed more tracks. But again, so many things seem to be, digital things seem to be copying what happened in the analog world, which is not a bit unreal thing, but we used to be able to do it like this, but we need to do it digitally. So it did open up so many opportunities. That and I mean, just thinking, because there were tape machines when I started, and they went on for many years. I mean, both for basic recording, but also for playing in sound effects.
Yes.
But of course, tape machines take a time to run up, as you know, that trying to sync somebody being hit on the head, playing it off a tape, you really have to start the tape almost before they start. And of course, if they change their mind, you're stuck. So the BBC developed a thing called a program effects generator, which was small cassettes of 1/4-inch tape, 30 seconds of them. And I mean, this was a beautiful, I mean, it's an enormous beast, which had 6 channels on it, but you could put the glass crash, you could put the hit on the head, you could put blah, 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 and it would start instantly. But when you looked inside this machinery, it had 3 enormous motors in, one to drive the tape, one to rewind the tape, and it's such beautiful machinery. I mean, you don't see things like, it's like the old tape machines. I mean, the motors in them were works of art. I mean, it's a bit like steam engines, you know. But it's but yes, that kept us going for a bit. But of course, then we got into mini discs and samplers, and then on to sort of computerized. But as you were saying earlier, it took time to move through all these elements. I mean, you mentioned National Lottery. There was a time when we were doing it on 3 mini disc machines and a sampler. I have worked with such good people. And I had somebody work with me for years and years and years, and he's still doing magnificent work at the BBC as a gram op. He developed and worked on all this stuff and made sure he was always up with the latest thing, and he could run these machines magically. And similarly, sort of floor staff. There's one particular chap, again, no names because it'll get difficult. You know who he is, but unless you have these very, very good people around you and good crew, you're hiding to nothing. That we were all working together, but the ultimate output of the sound, as you know, is only as good as everybody's contribution.
Yes.
If you're using a boom, unless the microphone's in the right place, there's very little you can do as the mixer. I mean, you can haul up the level, but they still sound miles away. That you are so dependent on everybody else that it is what makes it such a team effort. That you can't just do it on your own, and you only need somebody in the chain who is not as good as others, and it very quickly shows. I mean, there was an occasion on a national lottery at the centre where we were invaded by a protest group, and they jumped in the middle of the draw. They jumped off the audience roster, and they were carrying marine flares which were flaring up, and tried to make their point. And I mean, we got, I mean, ALAN DEDICOAT, who was the voice of the Boers, carried it through, and they were cleared out of the way and within sort of 5. But you almost wouldn't have known anything had happened because Alan chatted about something else while we cut away. But when the boys came upstairs afterwards, I mean, they were just ashen and white-faced because they didn't know what was going to happen, and it was at a time we were having lots of difficulties with terrorists. Were they going to let off bombs? But everybody kept going.
Yeah.
And
show must go on.
Yes, but it was only afterwards when you say you could really shock everybody out. I mean, as a viewer from the mixing position, I mean, you're worrying about just keeping it going and hearing the right things. But no, I mean, terrifying occasions. But everybody did what they could.
And I think that's quite a good, shocking story in a sense, but that's sort of the excitement of live telly as well, isn't it? You go on air and you're never quite sure what's going to happen in the next hour or however long you're on air, and it's that adrenaline kick that I think we all feed off. That's what we enjoy, but it is being able to think on your feet and solve those problems as you go is quite exciting. It must be absolutely lovely to be a part of so many comic moments have happened in history. I mean, there's the famous Dad's Army, don't tell them your name, Pike.
Yep.
But it's lovely, isn't it? It must be amazing to, only in hindsight, because I imagine at the time it was just another day at the office, really. And
I was thinking the other day, I could not be a script editor or whatever who reads scripts and decides whether they're funny or not. I was given my first Dad's Army script. I read through it, and read the next one. It's only when the producer and the director and the cast come together and work on it and produce the characters that it suddenly comes to life. I wouldn't be able to see that from a script.
No,
it's a particular talent which people have, which is excellent. But no, I mean, so many shows I've read the script and that's fine. You don't really know that it's going to be so successful.
And sometimes there's just this harmony of the moment and the time and everything, isn't there? And it just lands, and it's a brilliant thing. Because I believe you're involved with quite a few of the Morecambe and Wise. Were they Christmas specials or just regular?
Yes, I mean, we did various series, and then each year there was a Christmas special.
Yeah.
And I mean, and always something was pulled out of the bag. As you probably remember, I mean, there's a year that we had Andre Previn. I mean, quite amazing. I mean, we didn't know about it in advance. I mean, normally people talk through what's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. But I knew there was going to be an orchestra, and I knew Andre Previn was coming, and I knew the Morecambe and Wise were going to talk to them, but really didn't know what the sketch was going to be. And suddenly this wonderful sketch unfolded, which just happened in front of our eyes. You know, as I think intimated earlier, you think, well, I might need to cover that, I might need to cover that. So you mic the orchestra, you mic this, you do various things in readiness. And then, I mean, Mr. Preview was just so much with the act. I mean, it was staggering.
Absolutely brilliant.
No, that sound at its best, yes, again. Staggering. No, that actually because yes, I think I'd done my back in. I tried the previous week. I'd been moving a fallback speaker in the television theatre for replay, and I tried to take it down some steps on my own, which was foolish. And I actually mixed that kneeling down because I couldn't sit down.
Wow. That paints a picture as well.
Yeah, but yes, mixing up here.
But it is wonderful that sort of, it's just a sense of something going on, and our job is therefore just to bring that into someone's lounge, really, isn't it? And just to enjoy the moment, because that, I mean, it's all there, isn't it? It's
Yes,
for the taking. It's just such a fantastic bit of art, really.
No, as I think we may have said earlier, I mean, what I really enjoy also, and this is not critical of anybody, is that we are so much left on our own to decide all these things. That we will create what we think is right and what is best. And if people don't like it, they will tell us and we will change it. But it is that ability to really work at it ourselves that has always been the great pleasure.
So you worked a lot in your career with the Two Ronnies, didn't you? And I seem to recall you telling a story. Was it Ronnie Barker came into the rehearsal room after 1 week and said that you missed 2 laughs or something? And
yes. No, I mean, it's really just how fickle the industry is. Well, I mean, the world is, I suppose. And you've probably had exactly the same. People want you to come back to do another series, and in those particular times, we were managed by a sound manager who told the production who they were going to have. And but with Ronnie, if he was told he was going to have somebody else, he would have kicked up and said, "No, I want Mike," because he just felt comfortable that I was there. And this went on for 2 or 3 series, which was lovely. But halfway through this particular series, went to the rehearsal room for the outside rehearsal, and I was met by the floor manager, who said, "Ronnie would like to have a word with you when we're finished." Oh, fine. And I went in, and it was just deathly quiet. I mean, nobody was talking. They went through the routines and the various sketches, and it was all very strained. And we finished, and they said, "Oh, perhaps you'd come and talk to Ronnie," who, unbeknown to me, had said that in no way am I going to work with this man ever again at the beginning of when he arrived on that day. So I said, "Oh, what's the problem?" And he said, "Well, the show we did last week, you remember when I walked through the door and I had my armour on and the helmet and it fell off? I didn't hear a laugh. But my wife sitting in the audience says there was definitely a laugh there. What's wrong? How can this happen? Could we have somebody in the audience telling you when people are laughing? Could we, and offering all sorts of, from his point of view, sensible things. But he certainly didn't want me on the show if I was going to miss laughs like that. Somebody else must have got him. So I went back and I went to see the producer, and he said, "Well, Ronnie's not at all happy. Let's just get out the tape." And we got the tape out, and there was Ronnie. And it was actually a pre-recorded item. And walked across the set, went through the door, helmet went off. There was a laugh. It was only about 3 or 4 people. There were 3 or 4 people at a good level. So this was put to Ronnie. I said, "Well, actually, it is there. There was only a few people, but we can certainly hear it." I thought, "Oh, yes, because I was changing, wasn't I, for the next sketch? I probably had my shirt over my head. Yes, I probably didn't hear it." But, these things come out of nowhere.
yes,
And after that, all sweetness and light and
that's normal.
good buddies again. But suddenly, the whole world, it just stops.
Yeah.
You really don't know where it's going to come from.
Working with the Two Ronnies, there's obviously the very famous 4 Candles sketch, which I think you were part of as well. Another classic television moment.
Yes, TC4, left-hand set. These things come along, don't they? You really don't know when you go in the morning what you're going to find or what's going to happen. And suddenly there was a sketch that, because we rehearsed it, and it was fairly funny. And sort of people laughed during rehearsals and things, but it suddenly became such an epic sketch. I hate hearing it, because to me, Ronnie Corbett always sounds off mic, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, that's a shame, because we're about to hear it. Run VT, as they say, I think.
4 candles.
4 candles. Here you are. 4 candles.
No, 4 candles.
Well, there you are, 4 candles.
No, 4 candles. Handles for forks. Got any plugs?
Plugs?
Yeah.
Plug? What kind of plugs?
A rubber one, bathroom.
What size?
13 amp.
You've got a sketch there with Bonnie Corbett walking right round to the back of the set and walking back again, and it's covered with one long laugh, and there was no dubbing. I mean, that was genuinely as it happened. I mean, that's very daring because it could have just been a quick laugh and silence, walking all the way up and walking all the way back. I mean, it just went so well, and which is the art of the writing. It's probably one of Bonnie Barker's because he wrote most of them, but
Yeah.
you know, it's having the courage to do something like that, I think, which really makes a difference. That because there could have been a lot of empty air there.
Yes. Doing all these things in the TV studio, did you ever get involved in recording the music for the shows? I remember when I was young, there was TMS at the BBC at Television Centre, which was a fabulous music studio. TMS, obviously, for people who don't know, stood for the Music Studio. And it's where people, I know in that time, things like Paul Daniels' Magic Show, you could go and record the musical score with a live band. That was fairly recent at Television Centre. It must have been the end of the 90s, I guess, around that sort of era, or mid-90s maybe. So before then, were you... What did you do before TMS existed, for example?
The only place to record music was, of course, BBC Sound Radio Studios. We used Maida Vale, and got some beautiful studios there. But we if we were doing music for drama or even sort of sing tunes, those were the only places to go. I mean, beautiful places, beautiful acoustics, fine sound, and compared with television, everything was so clean and so tidy, and you daren't touch anything because you might leave finger marks. I mean, it was just a different world. And lovely studio attendants who looked after the studio and really cared for every detail in there. And they would rig the mics, unlike now we have to rig our own. And were quite protective, quite rightly, of their studio. And perhaps if you wanted to put C28 on the piano, you would be advised that, well, actually, we normally use the so-and-so. And you do that because that's what they usually do. And they were lovely days. We did then build a music studio, and we used to do our own stuff down there. But when it needed really big space, we went to studios such as CTS, that actually, it may have been while ours was being refurbished, but I did a show, Grace Kennedy, which was one of the first major music shows that I'd done. It was 6 half-hour episodes. But I do remember going there the first occasion, and unusually for a recording studio, the control room was upstairs, and enormous sound tests, very helpful people, very lovely. And everybody gathered. I mean, there's Johnny Coleman Orchestra, and there were backing singers, and there were people waiting to do tap dancing. And this must have been about 80 people there altogether. And 2 o'clock to start, and it was all rigged, and you can see the clock ticking around. And it's 2 o'clock, and it's a sudden realization that nothing happens until you say what we're going to do. And I mean, that I did find terrifying, because also I'd not much experience. So I assume you record the band first and then you probably do the backing vocals, but they want some taps on it. Do you now do the taps and then do lead vocals if you need to? But I mean, again, because everybody is so helpful, that we did the first now, and thankfully, I mean, Johnny came up and he listened to the rough mix. I said, oh yes, that's fine. And then, of course, it all goes on. But I can still to this day feel that terror of just seeing the clock going round and realizing that, oh, you've got to do something.
Yeah. It's always a relief as well when the MD or the band come up and have a listen and go, oh yeah, no, that's what we're, because you merely put together what you feel is right.
Oh, very much so.
It's an interesting point of training to be able to spend the time to do those and have the mentor of somebody sitting beside you and saying, oh, well, you've done it that way, but have you thought about doing it this way? And would that be better? Or has it actually made it worse? I don't know. Let's have a discussion on it. And you obviously had the benefit of a Wood Norton training, and then I imagine quite a bit of mentorship at the BBC as you were coming up through the ranks. And today it's a bit different. I feel it's just a different environment.
Yes, and I mean, again, economics and different ways of doing things, and the fact that it can be done. As you know, having somebody else with you in the room, because most dubs, as you know, we do on our own. And then when we think we finished it, produce it and say, listen to this to the production, and they will shake their heads and say, oh, no. But the fact of having a grammot with you is that second pair of ears. But unfortunately, and often not sure that works, and you think you go back and do it again. But because things change, and now a lot of it we all dub on our own, you haven't got that second pair of ears, which are difficult case to argue. I mean, because it costs money. But I found it invaluable because so often I will be, it's right. Oh no, you're probably right. That I think it makes it then so difficult for young folk generally getting into the business. Where do they go? I mean, there are good training schools, but and I believe the BBC does a few apprenticeships now, but we were taken in and nourished and we were educated, and there was the crew system that kept us all together, and we worked together and we all learnt from one another, whereas now folk, I feel, are very much out on their own. They have to blag to get on to a shoot or whatever, to go with the sound man or the cameraman or whatever. And it must be so hard to get in and establish it. And because producers naturally want the people they know will do a good job with a minimum of fuss, you can understand, because the BBC, as I think I mentioned earlier, used to have managers who would say, you are going to do this program, and the production would be told you were doing that program. And that was the way the system worked, which was ideal. That it meant that I would do a show 3 series, I'd get moved to another one. I'd be very hurt at the time because, well, I'm only being taken off. But it's only now you realise that was good management, because you were then put onto another show, meet another lot of production teams, actors, whatever, and somebody else comes in and does your show. That it was a system that gave everybody a broad base. I mean, as a side to that, I remember coming home and saying to Judith, I've been given a series of To the Manor Born. Said, but you'll ruin that. You can't do that. I knew exactly what she meant, because whoever had been mixing it previously had got a nice gentle style, still audience enough up front. It didn't need this great over the prof, but everybody's wobbling about. But yes, I don't know how we help people at the moment. It really must be very hard.
And we definitely need that next cohort, because, we all move up through the ranks and all change, and you need,
some of us are quite old.
Well, and there are people to learn from, and while they're still around, it's a good opportunity to learn and pass on those skills, basically. I guess the other thing is how we find ourselves today. It's a very changed career. I certainly haven't worked for months now because of the wonderful COVID situation and lockdown, and because most of the shows we're involved in are about crafting the show with an audience. Not many of those shows are happening. Fortunately, we're slowly getting back to that world, and I'm about to start Strictly. We started the initial planning for Strictly for this year. It's going to be very different, I'm sure, but I'm sure it'll be great, but in a re-envisaged form. And that's the good thing with television, is it can adapt to new things. I can't really say how Strictly is going to adapt, because partly we're still working it out, but it will be good, I'm sure. And
I mean, what happens if you if people want to have an audience? What are the things you're allowed to do? How can it be done? I mean, what?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. I know people have talked about possibly having a Zoom style audience, and I'm not sure how well that works, unless I've not tried it myself. I think one of the radio shows actually did try something like that. Obviously not live. It benefits from post-production and being able to choose the best sources and that sort of thing. But I'm being asked about certain shows that traditionally would be in a TV studio being done more like a drive-in movie, so like an American movie style. So the audience would all be in their cars, which I think for certain shows, certain brands, that might work quite well. It poses very interesting questions about how we get the sound to the people. Well, there's various options there, either using a stonking great PA perhaps, or using their car radios. These are both options we're considering, but the audience reaction is the hard thing that I haven't quite rounded the circle, or not the corners off the square, as it were. We'll try some things, I'm sure, and we'll find some ways about solving. And it goes back to one of our earlier threads, really, that things are constantly evolving, and productions are very good about putting challenges in our way. And I think in a way we encourage, perhaps, or we certainly enjoy that, because you do find creative solutions to those things, and it's often using bits of technology perhaps that weren't envisaged to be used in particular ways, or different techniques and so on. And I'm sure you're the same as me, that we both enjoy turning a hand to those things and trying to solve those things.
Puzzling over why it doesn't work.
Yes,
and fiddling for hours until it eventually does. Yes, it's no, I mean, when you think the first National Lottery I did was TC1, hour-long show, Shirley Bassey, 3 live music numbers with the Spice Girls and the cast from some musical. It's now down to 20 seconds. Mr. Dedicoat records the voices in his room at home. He sends them to me. I add the reverb and sync them to the pictures, and then I send it off to our graphics people who put it all together.
Who knows? It may well grow one day to being a massive LE show with all those elements again, and just go on a continuing cycle.
Yes, but how we can now do so much.
Yes.
I mean, you don't have to be in a studio to do it. No, I admire everything you're doing. I mean, it really is. You must have so much energy.
I don't know about that. It's been good, hasn't it, Mike? It's been nice to have a chat.
Enjoyed it. No, thank you so much, Richard. It's been a fun afternoon. I haven't had so much fun since we were locked down.
No, exactly.
Did you get a car this morning to bring you to this? I didn't.
No. I think mine's turning up later to take me away.
But I thought, there'd be a nice researcher to meet me and say, "Oh, Mr. McCartney, and welcome to the buildings, in hospitality, and nice meal and a glass of wine."
I'm looking forward to hospitality.
Yes, somebody to put my mic on, sit me down. Are you comfortable? Nothing. And you weren't sitting there saying, "Well, I'll do what I can, but you know how difficult it can be. I'll see what I can get out of it." I mean,